Good morning, everybody.
Me?
Welcome to a chat with Kat O'Sullivan, who's going to talk to us about retiring abroad, in particular to Mexico. So this should be a fun little journey. So thanks for being here. And for those of you who are going to watch it afterwards, I'm sure you're in for quite a treat. First of all, I am Pauline Field, and Coach for Women is the company. Some of you are already retired, and some of you are soon to be retired. So good for you. This is part of what it takes to design your joyful retirement. I'm retired and I'm working. They're not necessarily mutually exclusive. There's a whole lot to think about for a happy retirement. But today, we're talking about moving to another country, which amazingly, more and more people are thinking about. But there are big questions when you start to think about moving to another country. This is not a comprehensive list, but how do you pick the right country? What should be considered? Should I move only part-time? What's the process? Do you get homesick? And like I said, this is not a comprehensive list, but that's a start on some of the bigger questions. And here to answer them is Kat O'Sullivan. And let me tell you a little about Kat. Kat believes that when shift happens, it's time to make magic happen. She inspires people to move toward the future, just waiting for them to say, hell yeah, what they really want. Kat is known for doing the seemingly impossible. At 16, she joined an international cast of 100 youth to bring a message of hope and goodwill through a powerful musical while completing her senior year on the road. Kat called NBC and convinced Bob Hope, nonetheless, no less than Bob Hope, to sponsor her. And he did. Kat leveraged this experience throughout her career. Kat wanted to build a new life and enjoy every moment with her husband. So they packed up their entire lives and moved to a foreign country and did this during the pandemic. Kat's experiences as a businesswoman, foster parent, adoptive parent of a special needs daughter, and caregiver to ill parents fueled her belief that we are all living our legacy every moment of every day. I've heard from old clients and new friends alike that they're moving out of the country or thinking about it. And they have different reasons: cost of living, the climate, the political environment, and on and on. So tell us the story of how you came to move out of the US.
Yeah, never in my wildest imagination did I ever think we would move to a foreign country with a different culture, different language, let alone in the middle of a pandemic. But really, the pandemic was a catalyst for me, meaning that when COVID hit, I had a very successful consulting business, had been doing that for quite some time. When COVID hit and everything went sideways, it was really a time for me to step back and reflect on, is this really what I want to do? I'm really good at it. Everyone thinks I'm really good at it and should keep doing it. But really, is it what I wanted? Could I give myself permission to even think about what else might be possible? And that's a big question, like how many of us actually give ourselves permission to step back and think about, what we want to do next, what else is possible in our life. In hindsight, I think the biggest stumbling block for me was my success. It was my success that was keeping me stuck because I was good at it. And when COVID hit and things kind of went sideways, then it was like, do I want to keep doing this? And it was like, hell no. I was completely burned out. I mean, I was really good at what I did, but I wasn't feeling the same. It wasn't as meaningful as it once was. And at this stage of my life, is this something I want to just keep doing because of that? Or what else would I really want to do? And what really came to me was I wanted to shift from consulting and coaching to speaking and writing so that I could have a broader impact and really be able to take everything that I've learned and share it with other people. And as you said, I've done the seemingly impossible over and over and over again. And this was yet another opportunity to do that and to share with others how they can do that. I think the other thing was, frankly, as good as all that sounds, when I thought about it, I'm like, for me, and this was really bizarre, that felt totally impossible. Yet again, I'm at the situation where it seems impossible. And what made the difference was asking a magical question. What am I not seeing? What am I not seeing? And the magic in that was the minute I asked that question, it was like overnight, I saw this article about people moving to Mexico to retire in Mexico. And I'm thinking, Mexico, really? Really? And, you know, I could have just totally put that aside, but it got my curiosity up. So I started researching, and lo and behold, I was like, well, maybe this isn't as crazy as it sounds. Maybe moving to Mexico is an option. And so that started a whole series of what to do next.
That's so great. And I just want to emphasize what you said, because I think so many people can relate to it, that your success was keeping you stuck. I hear from so many people that retirement in general is something that they're afraid of and definitely don't want to look at because they're so successful. It's all good, whether they're burnt out, whether they're tired, whether they, secretly dream of, sitting on the beach or, playing racquetball or whatever, but yeah, so success is keeping them stuck. So that's great. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Many of my clients can definitely relate to wanting to reinvent their lives. Moving abroad is a big step and a decision not to be made lightly. Although I've heard of people who have regretted moving out of the country and have come back. There are also many others who are, like you, happy with their decision. So can you tell us why you picked Mexico and the Lake Chapala area? And what were some of the things that you considered when you were looking?
Yeah. So I think that the best thing that I did when I started thinking, well, maybe Mexico isn't so crazy, I took a step back and I said, I'm going to create a checklist of what are my non-negotiables, whatever decision we make, wherever we go, what would be completely non-negotiable? And then what are some things that would be nice to have? So this was really, really helpful. So when I did that, of course, first and foremost, it was affordable. Because frankly, the thing that made it feel like it was impossible when I first started thinking about this was we were dependent on my income to support our lifestyle. We had our Social Security, but living in South Pasadena, you cannot live on your Social Security. Nowhere near. My husband, Michael, is 18 years older than me. So he hadn't been working for quite a long time. He'd been retired. He had a life. I had my work. Never the twain shall meet. And we were totally dependent on me creating a substantial amount of income. So whatever decision we made, we had to be able to live on our Social Security, because I was done being in the position of me being responsible for our lifestyle. So that was the first and foremost thing, was it had to be affordable. The next thing, which is probably, a no-brainer, is it had to be safe. And that was one of the things that I had to really challenge my assumptions about Mexico. Because you watch the movies on Netflix about the cartels, and everyone thinks Mexico, it's not safe. Well, yes, there are cartels. Yes, they are active in certain areas. But in the lakeside area, Lake Chapala area, frankly, I feel safer here than I did in South Pasadena. And, when people say, oh gosh, is it really safe? And I'm like, have you watched the news lately? Have you picked up a newspaper lately about the violence in America? And we just don't have that down here. Yeah, there's isolated incidents here and there. But I remember one of the things the first couple of weeks we were here that really shocked me was I heard no sirens. I mean, none. And living in South Pasadena, we were up on a hill and East LA was down below us. And the bowl effect, it was constant sirens and gunshots and so it was kind of like, it took me a while to go, I haven't heard any sirens. So anyway, safety was a big thing. The other major thing was a moderate climate. Now, at the time when I was doing my researching, Lake Chapala was number 2, according to National Geographic's best climates, number 2. Wow. And it claims to be moderate, as in the 70s most of the year, maybe 5 degrees less, 5 degrees more. Now, I will tell you that right now we are at the effect of climate change. It has been in the 90s for the last month. And it should have started raining 2 weeks ago, and there's no sign of rain. So, relatively speaking, I'm not complaining because I know my friends in Texas have been in the hundreds, and climate change is affecting everybody. Generally speaking, it is a very moderate climate, and thank God there's no humidity, which was a big thing. I don't do well with heat and humidity. The other thing was it needed to be easily accessible. So we are about a half hour, 45 minutes from Guadalajara International Airport. And it's a 3-hour-ish flight to Southern California and 3.5 hours or so to Northern California, because we still have family in California. And it is an international airport, so I can go from here to wherever pretty easily, just as easily as from LAX. So that was a big consideration. Now, the thing that was not a have to, but really high on what would be ideal is water and mountains. Lake Chapala is the largest freshwater lake in Mexico, and we see it from our backyard. And we're surrounded by mountains both immediately behind us and across the lake. So when I started going through my checklist and comparing it to Lake Chapala, it was like, check. It checked all the boxes. So then it was just more researching what would it take to actually make that move.
Thank you. That's very interesting. I particularly am interested in what you said about safety and how you had to challenge your assumptions. Because I think that many people that I talk to, if I say I have somebody I know that moved to Mexico, they say, well, people are being killed over there. Yeah. And so it's interesting to hear your perspective and to, particularly when you think about the difference between all the sirens and the gunshots that you used to hear in southern Pasadena, which is supposed to be such a wonderful place, and it is. I mean, but and then you go down to terrible Mexico, and it's quiet with no sirens, and people aren't being murdered in most of the areas.
I won't say that we never hear any sirens, but that first week, it was such a shock.
Right.
But usually it's ambulances, not police and
Yeah.
National Guard.
I think you sold your home in California. Did you ever think of keeping your home in California and either buying or renting something in Mexico just to use part-time so you could kind of live in both?
Good question. And there was an absolute no bleeping way could we afford to do both. We just couldn't. So what worked in our favor, I will say, is that we made this decision at the height of the real estate market. So our house sold in 3 days after a bidding war for $400,000 over list price.
Wow.
Which allowed us to come down here and buy a home and buy a car, and everything is cash here. So it gave us the liquidity to be able to make this move pretty comfortably. But there are a lot of people here that live here part-time, the snowbirds, people that live in the northern US, Canada, that are here typically half of the year and back home the other half. Again, just from a weather viewpoint.
Uh-huh.
And there are people too that have a vacation home here that aren't living here part of the time. They just come down and vacate, they have some kind of vacation home, or they just come down and rent something for vacation.
We did another interview with Kelly Hayes Raitt, who used to spend, I think, 3 months at a time down right in the Lake Chapala area because she would house sit for this one family, and she would be there twice a year, as I said, about 3 months at a time. The owners of the home, they went back to the US.
Yeah, and we have met several of those people as well.
Uh-huh.
Who found a way to do the house sitting kind of thing. So there's options. It's not an all or nothing proposition.
Right. So once you decided to move, what was the process? And was it easy or were there difficulties? Tell us about it.
It was challenging. Bureaucracy reigns here. Now, I mean, it reigns in the US too in many ways, but here it's just different. It's getting to know this bureaucracy. So there is a whole process that you have to start in the US. So, we made our way down to the embassy in LA, and we had to complete a whole residency application. We had to provide things like health certificates, passports, background check. There's required income, for either temporary or permanent residency. There's a whole process of just simple things like 3 passport pictures, a government fee, which for us was like $44 each. It wasn't much, but there was a lot of paperwork, and everything is extremely time sensitive. So once you start that process, you better be prepared to, go through it exactly. And then, then there's a whole thing of if you are planning to ship any goods, like we had some things moved here, not much, but there's very strict limitations about what you can bring over the border. Very strict things about whether under what circumstances you can bring a car or not. So there's just a lot of learning. And then when we got to Mexico, we had 30 days to turn our visa into a temporary resident, our green card. Never did I think I'd be saying the word green card on this side of the border. I'm kind of a do-it-yourself kind of gal. So I thought, no problem. I'll go online, I'll figure it out. 3 failed visits to the immigration office. Each time, oh, well, you didn't do this, you didn't do that. Plus the whole language barrier. We finally hired an immigration attorney, and she was able to get it just in the nick of time, because you have 30 days, and if you miss it, you start over. And everything's on Mexico time. And that's not a time zone. It's just a different way of life. Everything's a little slower. And like I said, everything is not everything, but predominantly it's a cash society. You don't get a mortgage for your home or loan for your car or major purchases. So the interesting thing is it requires a lot more thought and planning, and it avoids a lot of that impulse buying, unless you just happen to carry around a ton of pesos. Because the other thing that we learned, and I would say for anyone that's thinking about doing this, if you don't already have a passport and you're going to get a passport, make sure your signature is really easy on your passport, because every document here requires that your signature matches your passport, and they check, literally. And I'm a Kathleen Ann O'Sullivan. Michael is Michael Joseph O'Sullivan. And I'll never forget going to the bank to open an account. And they had this little box, this little rectangular box. And you had to fit your name to make it look like your passport within this little box. It took me 3 tries. So, I mean, there's just little things, that you're not aware of that, could be helpful. And there is a vote abroad available. That's another bureaucratic thing, but you can sign up to vote abroad once you're here.
Great. By the way, I just want to interrupt, let everybody know that if you have questions for Kat, we might be covering them, but if not, you can put them in the chat, you can raise your hands, whatever you prefer. And at some point I will just stop and say, okay, do you have questions? And during the pandemic, I ran across many people who moved to other countries because they could do so, live less expensively, and work remotely. Today, many companies are reversing course and saying you have to come to work, which would make people still working think twice about living in another country. Now, you still work as a speaker and a consultant. Do you do all your work remotely, or do you need to return to the US, and how often do you have to come?
So far I've done everything remotely, and I'm primarily focusing on speaking and writing and highly select coaching, and that's all been online. However, I just want to reiterate that if I had an opportunity to do some work in the US or to speak in person in the US, it's very easy to go to Guadalajara International Airport, get on a plane, and it's not that different from, going from LAX. So there is a lot of flexibility there, but that is, certainly a consideration. I will say that the one challenge that I had early on was the internet, because their idea of high-speed internet is not our idea of high-speed internet. So it took me quite a while to come up with a solution, which for me ended up being Starlink, because it's satellite and it works beautifully. So, once I kind of got that figured out, I worried less about doing remote engagements.
Right.
But that's a consideration.
Yeah. One of the critical issues of retirement is to be connected with others. Do you miss family and friends, and have you had many visitors?
Okay, now I have a friend on here, so I won't address that. No. You know what? Ironically, we've had more connections with family, friends, colleagues via Zoom than we did in person. Because somehow you're oh so busy and everybody's schedule, et cetera, et cetera. But somehow one of the blessings of COVID, at least I think, was Zoom and being able to easily connect with people no matter where they are in the world. So that hasn't been an issue for us. We've stayed very connected to people, and we've had a steady stream of people coming down here to visit because it's a beautiful place to come visit. We have a wonderful guest master. And there was a while when I was like getting tired from being a tour guide. So that it hasn't impeded relationships in any way. As a matter of fact, I think it's actually helped in many ways.
Mm-hmm. So have you made new friends, established a new social circle where you are? And do people in the area speak English, or have you had to learn Spanish?
Well, I'll speak to the last thing first. One of the things that's very disturbing to me is that the vast majority of expats down here, and Lake Chapala has the most expats in the world, but most of them do not feel like they have to learn the language, which is just ironic given their attitude in the US about people coming from Mexico needing to learn English. So it's very, I don't know, it's crazy making, but I've been very committed to learning Spanish. I'm on day 253 of Duolingo, which is an app for learning Spanish. We've turned our wait staff into Spanish tutors. So when we go out to eat, we make them, we have to speak Spanish and they help it. I mean, people, when they know you're open to learning, they are so excited and want to help you. And they appreciate the fact that even if you're bad at it, that you're making the effort. So, that's been really important to me, and embracing the culture. In terms of creating community, making friends, it's like anywhere. If you want to do that, there are endless opportunities to do that. We have a wonderful neighborhood. We've made lots of friends, and they will be there in a heartbeat if you need them. The people and the culture here is very helpful, very welcoming, both expats and Mexicans alike. And we live in a community that has both. I also have gotten involved in volunteering with a particular nonprofit and have met a lot of people through that. I'm also part of a writers group. There's all kinds of cultural events, music, art, dance. You can find as much or as little as you want here. So it's really just about, what kind of effort you want to make to connect. And it's not hard. It's just a plethora of opportunities.
And that's such a good message because I think almost anywhere you go, there is plenty to do. But as you said, you have to put a little effort into it. And usually it doesn't have to be a lot of effort, just a little, and you get the rewards. So that's great. That's good to hear. And I know you've also found a tequila factory to visit. And
Oh, yeah. So we're only like an hour and a half from the town of Tequila, which is the birthplace of tequila. So we've learned a lot about tequila, and that sipping tequila is much more rewarding than the shots of tequila. So it's kind of like wine. We've learned a lot about how it's made and the best way to experience it and the different types of tequila. Yeah. So that was a little side benefit we weren't aware of when we moved here, but we've enjoyed that. And, I have to laugh. I was going to say this at the top of the call was, you promoted this as like something like love, lattes, and leisure or something like that.
Right.
And I'm like, everyone that saw that who knows me, they're like, leisure, you are so busy, you know. And I just want to say that yes, this is a yes, and I'm busy doing what I love in an environment that we love. And that's very different than what I was experiencing before we moved, when I was completely stressed out. So, yeah, you can
Yeah.
be as busy as you want to be here, whether it's work or play.
Right. And, leisure doesn't necessarily mean just sitting on your duff on the couch.
Right.
Yeah. So, yeah, good, very good point. So, from your experience for our members and guests here today, what are the top three things you would advise for people thinking of moving abroad?
Okay. I'm going to frame this in my infamous 4 C's. Okay. Which Pauline is familiar with. The first one is clarity. So the first thing you've got to do is get clear about what you really want. And, I talked about creating the checklist. That's a great place to start. Make your checklist, do your research, compare what you find to what's on that checklist, and really, really get clear. Paint the picture of what you really want, what that's going to look like in detail, and then research the possible places and compare. The other thing that goes hand in hand with that is your commitment. So that's all about being clear about your why. Why are you really doing this? So for me, it was a combination of wanting to shift from consulting and coaching and training to speaking and writing, along with wanting more time with my husband. With that 18-year difference, that actually became as much or more of a reason, because he had a life, I had my work, and who knows how much time we have left together. So creating a scenario where we would have more time to spend together doing what we love was really important. And if you don't have a strong why, I can tell you hands down that it won't work. Because the first time something doesn't go the way you expect, and let's face it, things never go the way we expect. You're gonna ditch, So you need to be clear about what you want and why you want it. And then it's really about building your capacity to do it. That's all about like the specifics of the process and details of how to make it happen. What do you need to learn? What do you need to know that you don't know yet? What skills are you going to need? Just all those kind of details. And then the last thing, which is also the first thing, is courage. First, you got to have the courage to give yourself permission to consider this. And then once you go through all that, you got to have the courage to take the first step, and then the next step, and then the next step. And believe me, it's really easy to get overwhelmed if you don't have kind of a step-by-step process, if you think you got to do it all. I will tell you, if you had come into our house in South Pasadena when we decided to do this, we had this humongous board with a 3-month calendar of every day, blocked out with all of the tasks and deadlines. Because once we decided in July and we moved in October. So we literally had to have, step by step by step and the deadlines. And it worked. I mean, before we knew it, we were on the plane and here we were.
And while you were doing all that, you were still working. So, on top of the enormity of getting rid of stuff, figuring out what you were going to take, doing all the paperwork, everything that needs to be, all those logistical things, you were still working.
it was a process of letting go and letting go and letting go. Because we not only sold our house, we sold 2 cars, we had a boat in Northern California, and there was all the furniture and everything. We literally had to divest ourselves. We chose, we didn't have to. We chose to let go of pretty much everything. You know, we had our 4 carry-ons, our 4 humongous bags that we checked in, and our big crate for Joy, our golden retriever. And then we had a moving company that brought minimal, it was like a van worth of stuff down. Everything else we either gave away, a few things we sold, but most of it we just gave away.
That's great. So I want to stop here before we go into our last couple of questions and see if there's any questions, comments, thoughts that any of our guests have.
Sure.
Hi, Kat.
Hello, everyone. I personally know Kat, and however, I want to presence the question about what it's like to do this single and to come there as a single, because one of the things for me here is people don't have the bandwidth, the time, make time to create connection. And so my question is, what is it like for a single woman of a certain age to come and create connection in the Lake Chapala area?
That's really a good question, Kat. And I know that's important to you. And I will say, I was thinking about this. Of all of the women friends that I've made, which are many, I think at least 90% are single. At least. I can only think of a few that are actually married. They're either widowed or just single. So again, that's not a stumbling block if you're willing to find your peeps here. And there's just so many opportunities to do that, depending on what you like, your hobbies, your interests, and just finding groups that resonate with that. I know, you're very much into the arts, and that's one of the things I love about here is there's so many artisans, and arts and culture are a big piece. A lot of people come here because of that. So again, we need to figure out what are our priorities. And if that's a priority, like I said, it's just a matter of time to find the people and places that you're going to find the people that you want to connect with.
Right.
Thank you.
Michelle or Reggie, do you have any questions for Kat?
Did I hear my name?
Yeah.
Yes.
I was just asking if you have any questions.
I'm taking a note. Not right now, because I'm a friend of Kat's too, and we've talked a lot and I've heard a lot. But I'll think of one, maybe a new one, but I don't have it right now.
Okay. All right, good. So just on a personal note, particularly, you wanted to be able to have more time to spend with Michael. But what else, other than what you've already talked about, what else do you love about living in Lake Chapala?
Well, number one, almost every day I wake up and I say, another day in paradise. And I remind myself not to take it for granted, because we've been here about 19 months. And it would be easy to start taking everything for granted that we have. And it's a lot. I feel really blessed. I think one of the things we haven't addressed that I really have come to appreciate here is healthcare. And that may be a surprise to many people, but I will tell you, we have gotten better healthcare at a fraction of the cost here. And I mean, I have a general practitioner And that's about it. Michael has a number of specialists. And if you need to see a specialist here, you might have to wait a week, maybe. And that's unheard of. And just the quality of the care, the caring. It's not unusual to go for a regular doctor appointment and be there for an hour, not in the waiting room, an hour with the doctor who he or she is just chit-chatting with you about life, about what's working for you, you know, beyond health. The funny thing, Mike's neurologist, we got into this whole conversation about Mexican wine. He whips out his prescription pad and writes a prescription for 3 different kinds of Mexican wine. I mean, when would that happen in the US, right? And we have a veterinarian, and doctors will make house calls. When does that happen? We don't take advantage of that because we don't have a need for that. But if you do need it, they'll come to you. Joy's vet will come here, or now she just opened an office right down the road. It took her to get her toenails clipped yesterday. It was a whopping 30 pesos, which is about about $1.50, $1.75, you know. I mean, it's just crazy good in terms of the healthcare. The other thing is the access to fresh produce and healthy food. I mean, we have mercados that you can go to that are like organic markets or just markets, not like the supermarket, where you can get fresh produce, freshly prepared foods, you know, like instead of going to the frozen food aisle and getting the frozen dinner, like they will have made it the night before or that morning, packaged for 2 people or 1 person, and it's healthy. There's no preservatives. So a lot of people find their health becomes a lot better, not because of the lifestyle, but also the quality of the food that they're putting into their bodies. And that was something we hadn't thought about. And the other thing I kind of chuckle about is when we lived in South Pasadena, Michael's an architect, a modernist architect. Our house was basically black and white because black is his favorite color. Is that a color? Anyway, so one of the things I have loved so much is decorating our home culturally relevant. Like I researched the palette, the Mexican palette. Our house was white when we moved into it. It's now all colorful, you know, using the Mexican, and we have local art from local artisans. So I have really enjoyed the opportunity to be creative in creating an environment that I really love. And thankfully, Michael's really enjoying it too, you know. But it's, if you were to compare like before and after, it's like black and white and color, you know. So, you know, that's been great. So yeah, so we love it here. You know, I won't say we have any regrets. There's been some challenges that we didn't expect. And one of them is in the last, particularly maybe 6 months, the devaluation of the dollar has really affected the currency exchange. So it used to be like 20 to 1, and now it's like 17 to 1. So that affects cash flow. Fortunately, we're okay. But, you know, that's a little scary to see, you know, how much the dollar's been devalued. Climate change, I mentioned previously, has been a little disappointing, not dissuading, but disappointing. And then we definitely don't miss the news, the media, the constant bombardment. We have not watched the news since we moved here. The US news, period. Nada. I think the other surprise, or the thing that's been a bit of a challenge, is the mail, getting mail and packages. So we do have Amazon, Mexico, but not everything's available. And we have a local equivalent of like a PO box that we have everything shipped to. And we have a virtual mailbox in the US where anything that's forwarded to that address, they open and scan it, and we can decide if we want it or not. But it's inconvenient to say the least. So Pauline, if you wanted to send me a gift and you sent it here, the cost to receive it would probably outweigh the cost of whatever you sent.
Wow.
So, there's just things like that are unexpected that you just have to figure out the workarounds, and we have, but it's not always convenient and or timely.
Okay, I have a couple of questions from Michelle. So did you go to Lake Chapala before you decided to move there? And once you decided it was the place for you and Michael, did you go to the city to figure things out?
Okay, drum roll. We decided, as I said, in July of 2021 to move. And we actually got on the plane on October 10th to come down here. We never visited before we made that decision. And 3 weeks before we got on the plane, we came down here for 1 week to find a rental. It was crazy, totally crazy. But we're not the only people that have done that, interestingly. But I had done serious research before we did make that decision. And I see she was asking how much money you recommend. Well, there is, and I wish I could tell you what it is, but there is an amount of money that you have to move down here in terms of monthly income. And that's certainly adequate, more than adequate to live here in terms of your day-to-day expenses. I mean, we are definitely living on probably 60% of our Social Security. Comfortably.
And different countries definitely have different amounts that they require, both as kind of like I don't know that it's a down payment, but there's a lot of countries that want anywhere from 5,000 to 100,000 or more for the privilege of moving to their country.
Right.
And then you have to have a certain amount of income coming in that you can prove that, because countries don't want you just living off welfare or something like that.
Yeah. And it's not inconsequential, their requirements. And the best way to find that out is to go online to see what the current one is. But it is definitely a consideration. And they're getting more tight about who can come in and how much you need. Because frankly, the impact here on the infrastructure, because so many people are moving here, it's having a negative effect. So I think it's going to tighten up. I know a lot of countries are tightening up their requirements.
Yeah. So we just have time for one more quick question. What was the most unexpected thing you found or experienced when moving?
I think I've covered a lot of that, meaning, frankly, the biggest thing was just all those assumptions that I had about Mexico that have been challenged, and how much we love the culture and the people and the opportunities here. So I'd say that unexpected things are more on the positive side than the negative side.
That's good.
Get in touch with Kat. It's kat@katosullivan.com. Our website is katosullivan.com. And her phone number, which is an American phone number, 323-697-1945. 1166.
If you're interested, one of my goals, my passion coming down here was writing. And I just had published You Can, You Will. I wrote a chapter called Answering the Call. It's a book about finding hope and inspiration in the face of loss, grief, mental health challenges. I wrote a chapter about how an unexpected call led me to Vanessa, my daughter, who I took when she was diagnosed with a terminal brain tumor, expected to live 3 months. She lived 26 years. So my chapter shares that story in more depth.
Great. All right. So any last thoughts or comments, Kat?
I see Reggie's hand.
You know, Kat, I think you said from the time you made the decision until the time you moved, it was a 3-month process. But there must have been a time before that when you were when the dissatisfaction was either underneath or rumbling around in you, and you knew you needed something really different. Because I remember what you said when Michael came through and asked you what you wanted, right? And you said, yeah, I want a different life. And that seemed to be the beginning of it. What was the, prior to that, what was going on and how long had been going on that was kind of like loosening your roots?
It was kind of like a gruesome year when COVID hit, until I just decided enough already. Nothing was working. I finally said, maybe the fact it's not working is a good thing. And, you know, there's a reason it's not working. But then I think it was probably a couple months of that research once I decided to do something different. Couple months of research, then we made a decision, and then we moved.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. This has just been wonderful. And Kat, I really appreciate you taking the time, as well as everybody that's on the call. And again, you can get in touch with Kat O'Sullivan.
Thank you so much.